Good morning.
Morning.
Change that background to something more recent. I like 4-day work weeks. We should have more of these.
Tell me about it.
Doesn't seem I'm getting any less work done. It just gets condensed into 4 days.
It does. That it does. Hi, Shashank.
Hey, Lachlan. How's it going? Steve?
Hey, Trisha, how you doing?
Dan.
Hey, Brandon.
Good morning.
Hi, Brendan.
How's it going today?
Good, thanks. We were just saying how much we appreciated a 4-day work week and we should do it more often. Same amount of work, just less amount of time. So maybe more productive, I don't know.
Definitely has, you know, there's what are the 410s, what people do.
Yep.
Still not sure that's
Yes.
accounts for the amount of time put in some things, but especially in COVID, it's just like, yeah, it's nice. I think I'm looking forward to being able to drive back and forth to an office and have that mental shift. And just while we're waiting for others to join, we do have, I did queue up both next week's, which will start on Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Pacific time, an hour earlier from now. And this week's for, so people knew there was still 8 a.m. Friday today versus next week. And Melinda is actually on vacation yesterday and today, so he gave me a heads up. So today we're really just, we're trying to converge. I'm still waiting for others. Oh, Shiwei's here, great. We will make this easier for you, Shiwei. What time is it?
It's 11 p.m.
Yeah. So that was also why we did 7 a.m. versus 8, is to be fair to Shiwei. And not 11 p.m. on a Friday night. So let me just check something, because Melinda said somebody else was joining in his behalf.
Anybody that's still up on these meetings at 11 p.m. on a Friday may not still be sober. I don't know.
Okay, Pritesh was supposed to join on behalf of Melinda. All right, Teja, hey. All right,
Hey,
well,
Steve. Hey, Steve, this is Samir. I'll take notes on behalf of Milind.
Great, thanks. Did he give you some feedback on some of the issues that we wanted to talk about today?
No, we didn't have a good warm handoff. I've been traveling, so but I'll take notes and I'll ping Pritesh on the side.
Okay, fair enough. So just going through, so well, okay, that's Luckily, from Zoom, it doesn't, people that joined since you joined didn't see the link, so I'll just paste it again. Actually, is that the July 9th one? Started. Okay. So we had a bunch of hack docs that folks were iterating in because it was a little fast and more iterative to be able to comment and edit and so forth. But where the list has grown, so we wanted to get these merged back in. And worse is because we merged some stuff directly into the branch, which is good. We hadn't really, these hack docs weren't written in the sense of merging or something. So I know Melinda's, I think it was the rescinding signatures. I forget which one was the one he was going to work on top of the others. So that's part of the backlog. So what I wanted to do is not necessarily review in detail each one, because there are a lot of comments, is just get some owners for each one so we can figure out the next steps to get these merged in. There's a lot of great comments and there's a lot of great content there that we just need to merge. So if I look at, here, let me just share my screen. We'll do it this way. It'd be easier to follow along. So we have the key set. There's a couple of here. Just by looking at the titles, we can see we've got this rescinding signature, signature expiry, signing key expiry, and basically there's these four. If I move these together, it might make more sense. Oops. And there we go. So Chiwei,
It
you
looks
were
like
in.
the,
Yeah, go ahead, Maria.
oh, sorry, I was just gonna say that it looks like there's two rescinding signature ones, so those can probably just totally be combined.
Well, that's what I was about to
without
say,
being them,
yeah.
but-
Because in fact, when I was trying to create the issues, it was a little confusing because I think I've seen this one before. So the way I did it is each one of these is an issue, so we don't have to guess where the hack doc links are. And then in the hack docs, they link. Oh, I see. Thanks, Brandon, for that one. So we have them to track. But yeah, that was the main concern, is that it looks like there was a bunch of duplicates at this point. So Chiwei, was it you and Malin that were driving, owning these?
Let me see. So you've been driving this mini?
Sorry, driving these docs. Like here,
Okay.
it's like,
So the owner of the rescinding signatures is is Melin.
and signature expiry.
Yes, it's expiry. Yes, me. I think so.
That's Niaz. Okay,
I think it's me.
I think this one's used. Okay. Well, actually, okay. So did Niaz start this one and then you took over it? Yeah, Niaz. I mean, Niaz started a bunch of these, but I think he was Malin was taking over from there on those. So how could we get these converged into a PR we can start iterating on? Because I think there's a lot of notes in all of them, but I think the notes have come to generally some logical conclusion, at least enough to try to get these into a PR or a couple PRs.
Yeah, I think there's some key management work in the GitHub repo as well. So I think if we can just converge that all into one document, I think that'd be super helpful for looking at it.
Exactly, yeah.
And speaking of, I'm happy to help with one or more of them working on that process.
Yeah, I think that's the piece here. So if we can get you, Niaz, and Chiwei, not Niaz, sorry, Malind, and Chiwei to kind of carve up what you want to do here to converge these in?
I can take the signature ones. I think there's like a signature theme in a few of them. I can try and merge that all into maybe partly in key revocation, but also just more generally into starting to make a spec for what we want for signatures.
Where is the actual signature one? Chiwei, where's your signature spec?
I've sent in the chat.
Oh, is that not one of these?
No.
Okay, I missed one then. All right, that's what, where is chat? What am I missing? Where did chat go today? There we go. Okay. Okay, so we didn't have this one yet. So let's get this one in there as well. Make this RC1. And this one is actually the spec as opposed to the requirements. Somebody say something? 86. Okay. So, and let's get that one here. All right. And Chiwei, you driving this one?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure who's typing.
It's me. It's me typing.
Okay. So I don't know if we want to get some separate, if you guys want to just continue iterating, whether it's converging in the hack or just going straight into a PR, but somebody to own the creation of the PR, and then we can just iterate on that, including whether those sit on top of existing, right? That we talked about, at least, I can't remember which one of these. One of these was going to merge in with the last PR that Marina had. Was it the key revocation, Marina? Was that this one?
Yeah, this is the document that there's
Okay.
a lot of overlap between this and a couple of those documents.
Right. So the plan was to get this merged, and then we can start doing PRs on top of this one to update this one. Okay, great. This one, have you come to a point where, well, actually, this is probably the other conversation we've been talking about, but I really would like Melinda and Diaz to be here for this one, because this is the one that I think there's a lot of desire to leverage one of the existing formats, and we were trying to see if we can do this with, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'll let you finish first. Sorry, I hadn't thought.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just going, this is the one, like, we're trying to not, there's obviously things that we have to invent that's new, right? There's enough new things in here. And if we can leverage some of the stuff that already exists, that was certainly the place, especially in the case of the combination of libraries and whatever conformance and compliance, things we want to talk about related to the signatures and envelopes. I've been generalizing those as signature and envelope, which I should probably separate those out. So I know that there is a detailed conversation here around whether we should use one of the existing ones that are kind of battle proven, or can we start aligning with the Intoto one or the DESI one. So I know there's a bunch of conversations related to that we'd love to, if we, for some reason, if we can't today use DESI, then I'd like to at least identify what is the gaps so that team can figure out, to fill those gaps so that we can converge on those. But that's the piece that I think we're at this point.
Yeah, I think that
Which
in the
one is
issue on the,
battle-proven that you're referring to?
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, when you say this versus something battle proven, like which one are you considering battle proven?
Shiva, you want to jump in here?
So I added the JSON serialization into the stock. So if you look at the requirement, so the requirement is in 3 sections. The first one is the payload. So it defines what is required for a payload. And the second section is about the signature, and third section is for the signature format. So if you look at those requirements, you'll find that the JWT does not meet the requirement because it cannot store the unsigned signature metadata. And yeah, so can you scrolling down a bit to the next one?
JWS?
Yes. JSON serialization is good. I mean, the general one or the flat one, both are okay. The general one can store multiple signatures, and the flat one can store just one signature, but it can store both the not both, all of the payload, the signed signature metadata, and also the unprotected or unsigned signature metadata. So I think this existing format met our requirement. And for the next format, which is the DESI. Steve, can you scrolling down a bit to DESI? Yes. So as you can see, DESI is very simple. It's deadly simple. Yeah. And the problem with this one is it does not support. I mean, currently does not support the a full list of the unsigned signature metadata. So we cannot add arbitrary unprotected signature metadata in it. And this thing is being discussed in this issue. I will paste the issue link in the chat. I think millions.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think I would make the case that anything unsigned, like parsing anything unsigned, is just a dangerous proposition. And you can always just put stuff in the signed metadata, even if it doesn't need to be validated. And that's kind of what the discussion in this thread is, which is what I was going to say, is that it's kind of converging to, you can just put extra data into the payload of DISI. That's kind of like how it's designed to be a little simpler on the outside, where on the inside you can just throw whatever you want into the format in there.
If I could quickly add a follow-up to Marina's note, we even saw this during discussions in DISI. People wanted to put things like algorithm hashing schemes in the header, which is a problem. And Docker actually found the security bug. Hold on, let me find it. But the basic problem is that if you let attackers control this in an unsigned scheme, you run into security issues.
I'm wondering if we're looking at this from the wrong level. We're saying the signature format must include the ability to have unsigned data because we want to pull in that unsigned data after the fact for the TSA. And typically when you're dealing with registries, you're going to say, here's the signed blob. It is in format X and it is signed. And then you could upload a separate blob that's going alongside. And you might have an index of here's all the stuff we're looking at. That's the TSA. And so it doesn't have to go in the signature payload at all at that point.
Well, then it's unverified, no?
It would be the TSA itself that's doing their signing of their content.
And is that signed in by signed? Oh, the TSA. I see.
And the problem that
Okay.
they're looking at is they're saying, hey, we're uploading a signed artifact. We're then going to go to the TSA and get them to sign it. And then we want to inject that on top of this. And I just feel like it should just be a separate blob at that point.
Well, then you have other interesting security issues. Like it's possible that someone who's holding a compromised key and fools the TSA to sign the wrong algorithm.
Yeah,
So
there's a lot of stuff with the TSA.
There are interesting
But,
edge cases like this, and I'm worried that we might repeat Notary V1's mistake here unnecessarily. So there's definitely room
I
for
pasted a
discussion.
link to that,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah, my overarching concern though is that we just threw out all of the existing formats here because we want to be able to inject TSA within the signature format, and I don't know if that's a valid requirement.
Yeah, because even if it's you could then put that into signed metadata, and then you could still, you could just access it from there. I don't see the issue there. Like you could then parse the signature, then parse the timestamp, and make sure that that's valid, and then parse the rest of it, basically.
We cannot add to
Half page up, Steve.
we cannot add the TSA to sign metadata, right? Because if we add TSA, then signature is no longer valid there. So TSA is basically like a counter signature which signs on the hash of the data.
Oh, okay.
And-
Yeah, actually, I think that there's another thread in the DISI actually spec as well about specifically TSAs. I think because of that. Sorry, I forgot about that. I can link it here somewhere.
There, yeah, I was looking at Steve was in the signature format. So the one section just below this
Oh, which one do you want?
signature format right there is coming up. And we've got the section that says it must include the unsigned metadata because of the TSA. And so that's where we had this must requirement for the unsigned just because it's one piece. And I feel like we can eliminate that piece and that just changes the whole equation we're looking at here.
And just for the record, I'm not totally convinced that TSAs are the only good way to ensure timeliness of metadata. So I don't know if we should bend over backwards for that.
I think that is, maybe not, but I think that is the place that I've heard the most convergence on supporting ephemeral clients. So if there's something alternative, that'd be good. to
Yeah, I mean, I
discuss.
think that, this is part of like the issue with designing the whole system is that, like, yes, I understand why we kind of were talking about that, but I think, looking back at it now, maybe we think in light of the signature envelope discussions, is there another approach that would work? That's my only thought, is that we should maybe at least have the discussion before bending over backwards to make it work here.
So what are the next steps here? I mean, I think the team has been trying to close down on what they want to use for the envelope and format and getting those conversations going. Julie, was there a recommendation in here? I'm trying to remember.
Currently, we don't have a recommendation here. So we are reviewing all existing ones. Can you go back to the above section for the existing formats? Okay.
Which one?
Okay. The next one. Just go to the next.
After Desi?
Yeah, after DASI. This one just define the payload. It does not define anything else. So just skip it. So let's look at the CMS. The CMS format is very good. It's mature and it supports lots of stuff. However, the problem with this one is it only supports certificates. So if you have just a raw key, then you cannot use this kind of signature format. Yeah.
So I'll add one more thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So the recommendation looks like example by extending DISI, which is okay. So maybe DISI doesn't do some things that's required here, which is legitimate. But then I'm worried about forking the standard and doing something custom because we could accidentally create security issues without realizing it. So I think it's better to just stick with DISI or whatever format you want to choose. It should be secure, but the point is you shouldn't fork it. And you should get community consensus is what I'm trying to say, because it's really easy to create security issues here.
Yeah, for personally, I will choose one of the JWT, no JWT, JWS JSON acceleration or DAISY. So because they are all similar, and I'm just considering both.
Got it. Do you think it would be a good idea to get a vote? How should we go about this, Steve? What is the process for building a consensus?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily just about a vote. We're trying to make sure we've surfaced all the questions, and this is what, why I've been trying to figure out, can we align with Desi and Desi, I'm not sure how you want to pronounce it. And I think the question is there extensibility? And this is where I'm a little bit disadvantaged, because it was either Melinda or Niaz had some other extensibility they needed around some AWS attributes. And I don't know if we got clarity on exactly what those were, whether they can go into the payload or the envelope. So I think we just want to continue having this conversation and call out the needs, and including, can we get Dizzy to have the extensibility that the crypto experts are saying they're looking for.
Yeah, and I think that in that thread on Dizzy, I think that the timestamp is the only one that's still sticky. The rest of them could fit into the payload. And I do think that there's a separate discussion about just having a timestamp field added to Dizzy, because this is a pretty common ask, and it does actually have to be outside of the payload. So I think basically on convergence, I think we're getting close, would be my summary there. And I agree with, it would be nice to converge with something existing, just for all of the reasons mentioned. So it would be great if we could make that all work out.
I mean, she was even gone even further and starting to look at, like, all right, if we come up with this format, what libraries are available out there, and how stable are those libraries to be able to use? And specifically in Go, there's been a couple of different places where there weren't libraries, there weren't complete libraries, or they weren't whatever certified means. So I know he's been doing that. Well, here it's even talks about here. So this is also a great place that if this is where we go, well, actually that was CMS, sorry. Wherever we go, to make sure that there are libraries and there is a community backing behind those libraries, so to make sure that they stay updated and and so forth. So I think this one, this has been great to talk about the requirements and capture this as the requirements one, and then get this into a PR where we can start having that final conversation and close. So Shiwei, did you put yourself as owner on this one?
Which one?
Yeah,
Yes.
the signature spec. Okay. And I guess this isn't really a signature spec. This is the requirements. We'll call it signature format just to be consistent with the heading. Okay, great. So where is the latest conversation with Dizzy and I don't know whether TSA specific. I mean, TSA seems like a very common property that probably should just be added as well-known properties, as opposed to this other category of things where there was extensibility needed for AWS to add whatever it is that they were looking at. Has there been more conversation there in the Dizzy environment, the Dizzy group, on how that'll get handled?
We had a proposal for timestamps, but we kind of paused just to wait to make sure it would meet these requirements. So there's an issue sitting there with a proposal that we think works, but we didn't go ahead and merge it and push the spec version because we wanted some more feedback and to let it bake.
Yeah, I pasted in the chat the general issue about kind of the notary stuff, and I think linked from there, there's the one specifically about timestamping, which is yeah, it's in there somewhere.
So what is the next steps there?
Well, I think basically it's just to get consensus from this community and other communities that have asked for the timestamp property, that adding the timestamp, the timestamp field as proposed would meet the requirements before then just merging it in. So I don't think there's like a big process there. It would be nice. I guess the first thing is, do we have consensus here that just having a field? I think the proposed field is just like, timestamp field, and then it's just any data could go in there. It's just one field, which would then provide, the TSA, you would put that in there.
Oh, I see. So you kind of have an extensibility bucket that's not specific on the format, but it's categorized as TSA or timestamp.
Yeah, exactly.
And it is the idea that you would have different timestamp specifications?
I think that the reason it's a little bit general is that I don't think that there's a like industry consensus on a specific format for that at the present moment. So
Yeah, there is the RFC 3161 version. There's a separate JWT version of timestamps. There's new stuff going on. So just call it timestamp and you can put whatever you want there.
in the future, if the industry does pick one of those, you know, it can then be more specific.
Okay. And what about the other general extensibility? And Shue, maybe you can categorize, or Pritesh, if you know what it is, to generalize it better of what the, whether it was in the envelope or the payload that AWS is looking for more extensibility.
So one thing we were looking for was to inlining the certificate in the signature as unsigned data. So right now we only the DZ only supports key ID, which can contain the key or which can refer outside. We were looking for something like inlining the certificate and certificate chain.
Yeah, my thinking, maybe this is what Brandon was saying too, is just to put that stuff in a separate blob. He's leaving right now. Terrible timing. Like any cert chain or any other trust chain stuff would go in a separate blob. But yeah, it's just early thinking.
Yep, that was my thought.
I think
You summed it up, and I gotta jump.
Thanks, Brandon.
I like that idea as well, because that way you can know the exact key that is trusted to verify the envelope before you then are accessing the envelope, which I think is just generally a good best practice.
Okay. I think that's part of what what I'm hearing from folks is they're just looking for some place to close down so that we have something to iterate on. So if you guys can get that closed and resolve some of the, what I want to do is make sure that if for some reason there's a belief that we can't use that format today, what would those gaps be that need to be filled? So there's this checklist that says, all right, here's the 1, 2, and 3 things that we need to add to CNDESI to be comfortable with it. And then there's an action list for that. I forget what, let's see.
So from my understanding, for certificate, we are inclining towards adding them as a signed payload inside the blob.
Sorry, say that again, Pritesh.
For certificates, we are inclining towards adding them as a signed payload inside the blob.
Signed payload inside which blob?
Like the data which would be signing, it would be part of a payload in DZ, the certificate and certificate chain. That's what we are inclining towards.
You verify the signature.
Can you say it again, Milo?
There would be a circle. How would you verify the signature if you need a certificate that is inside? I think the assumption was that whatever we do with the registry features, there would be an ability to associate multiple blobs with the image. So one of them would be the signature and one of them would be the certificate, maybe with some other metadata. At least that's how I understood the proposal.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. If you put the certificates in the signed payload, you now have to parse the signed payload first to figure out the certificates, which is the danger principle. You want to try to avoid parsing anything that hasn't been verified yet.
Yeah, I agree that. And certificate themselves are verified by the certificate chain and trusted there.
There is another problem that I found recently. I discussed with Santiago. There's an old problem in cryptography called exclusive ownership problem. So it's similar to, so if you don't have a trusted source for keys, right, to verify the signatures, and you stick them in, for example, in the unsigned part of the message, you could fool people to accept a signature produced actually by another public key. So this is why this is why we should be careful to actually couple key distribution with the signed part of the message. There's a reason for this. You want to avoid all these problems in security we've been talking about today.
Hi, Shoshan. Can you paste that reference in some, for example, in this note?
Yes, certainly. Let me see if we wrote something publicly. Yes, I think we did. Yeah, let me put a
Thank you
comment.
very much.
But there's
Just a
academic
reminder
papers.
for,
I don't know how much.
sorry, Marina, just 1 second, just because I see us keep on pasting notes in the chat session disappears after the call. So please paste things here in our notes so that we actually do maintain them. Anything that we want to
Yes, certainly. That's a good idea.
Sorry, Marina, go ahead.
No, I mean, maybe Trishak has a better reference. The only one I know of is academic papers about this topic, which is always unfortunate. But because they're less approachable to a general audience, but at the very least, we can paste those in.
Also for Daisy, there are some signature-specific metadata, like the, for example, if you want to revoke or rescinding the signatures, not at the key level, but the signature level, we may need to add some signature-specific metadata to the envelope. If we put those things in the payload, although it's signed, but that means this envelope should only have one signature. If there are two signatures in the envelope, then the metadata cannot be shared in the, the metadata in the payload cannot be shared for the both signatures. So how can we deal with that?
Sorry, could you repeat this again? I missed that while I was trying to paste links.
So there may be some signature-specific metadata, and if we store those data in the, in the payload, so what if we have two signatures in the envelope? So we cannot save all the signature-specific metadata for both signatures in the payload. There will be a conflict, right?
Where,
Oh,
so,
maybe I'm
sorry, on the two multiple signatures, what was the scenario where we have multiple signatures on the envelope?
Because the envelope support multiple signatures.
Yes.
But
We can just
have a
not do
scenario
that.
that needs it.
No, I mean threshold signatures is a common thing. There's some use cases where you might want, I don't know, at least two signatures out of 3 keys, for example. So it's a
No, I get well, that's what I'm trying to figure out where they get parsed, because what we've been saying from the Notary V2 stuff is that we actually obviously support multiple signatures because they evolve over time. But at any one time, the idea is each signature is itself a signature that's an independent. I'm trying to understand where the scenario is that you actually have two signatures combined at one point that are in the same payload, as opposed to here's two stamps that are two signatures, two entities, two things that are assigned as reference to the thing that they're signing.
Well, I think it just depends. It's just an implementation question, because I think we definitely want to support the ability for one individual payload to have multiple different signatures. Whether those are uploaded as two separate files or combined into one file, I think just depends on the key discovery process and how that process is going to work. Because I could see a case for either one of those. But it just depends on how you're going to find those signatures, and whether you want to download one file and look for the signatures that you're looking for in that one file, or look for the correct signature and download that and then verify it. That's just a I don't know, it depends, just a discovery issue.
Well, there's the complexity of how do you parse those and manage those and whatever, Sheila was starting to go down at least one path on that. And we definitely support end signatures, but the end signatures is something that evolves over time. So the way we've said we're going to support a collection is each signature is an independent object that can be validated, references the thing that they're referencing. There's nothing that says that a signature couldn't reference another signature. You can even chain them if you want. But the idea is that the registry kind of follows the model of everything's additive. There is no updates to something. So I'm trying to figure out what is the use case for having two signatures in the same payload versus just two signatures pushed as independent signatures. You can still say both have to exist to pass validation.
Yeah, and I could see a case for you wanting to have multiple developers on the same team sign it, and it's easier for them to upload it as one file. But I do generally agree. I think that in light of the want it to be immutable, it would probably be easier just to have them as separate files.
I think it's quite possible to have the same signature payload in 5 signatures. Nothing prevents that. Just don't need to require it for anything. If you truly want to have a multi-signature format, fine, but that's not what's happening. If you have 3 separate signatures with that share the payload, but have some kind of different signature metadata. If we already have top-level multiple blob support, we just don't need to re-implement one more layer of multiple signatures within a single signature blob.
Yeah, that's what part of the problem I'm trying to avoid is having 2 ways to do the same thing. And if we need it, fine. That's what I'm just saying. I'm not saying let's not do it. I'm asking what is the use case that we couldn't say the collection is over as individual signatures. And to your point, you can take Acme Rockets can sign the same thing multiple times. The second signature might have some additional metadata. It might be later on. It says, I'm now extending the length of the signature or whatever the extra metadata is in it. But to have a payload that has multiple signatures in it and there's multiple signatures just adds complexity. So if we can avoid that, that would be preferable. Because the immutable model is if you do want 2 entities to sign at the same time, they would literally have to offline sign it, create it, and then push it as one. And then the registry APIs, well, in this case, the registry APIs wouldn't know that the payload actually has multiple signatures in it. The registry is just going to say, hey, here's these things that are reference types, party on. And then the client now has to deal with the complexity of this payload that it got back, this object it got back actually has multiple signatures in it. By the way, I have these other signatures that I got as individual as well. So if we can just figure out what the actual use case is, then until we can find, I guess, a specific use case, can we keep them as separate objects?
I think that because of the immutability, at the very least, we'll want to be able to have the ability to have separate objects, whether or not each individual one can have multiple. So I think that that's a good place to start.
Okay, cool. And does Dizzy kind of follow that same model? Or does he have...
It supports multiple signatures in one, but that doesn't mean you can't just use it twice for different signatures, right? Yeah.
And I generally like the model of things being a collection, and you can say that the spec says the collection should only have one. That's a good model, because in the future, if you do need to find a valid scenario, then you modify and say, okay, now we're allowed 2. As opposed to having to change the property from a collection, from a single to a collection. At least in the artifact manifest when we've been discussing it, we did reduce it back to 1 because having a collection made it much harder to do ref counting and garbage collection lifecycle management. So we did explicitly script that back to 1. I'm just trying to figure out what the dial is here in the signature formats and the envelope forms. Okay, anything else on that one?
Yes,
I
I think
have
basically
something
we'll
to-
just
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Maria. Yeah, I'll go ahead.
I was just going to say, it sounds to me like the next steps are just to finish resolving those issues in Dizzy and see if that can be the next path forward. But was there another concern? So I didn't want to interrupt.
This is where I just want to, I want to, unfortunately, Niaz and Milind aren't here, and it sounds like Pritesh didn't get a chance to sync up with them on the handoff. So I want to be careful not to wrap that up as a conclusion, and because then I don't have enough details to really represent it myself. So I think it's a good parking lot to have as a track element, and we're really happy to hear that the Dizzy conversations are continuing, because that was the thing. And you know, Shui opened up some issues, and it looks like there was a bunch of conversations there. So that's great to see. All
Yeah,
right.
I have something to add here regarding the custom metadata that AWS like pointed out. They wanted to add some custom attributes like QA passed or some kind of machine name, whatnot, that has to be signed. So one guideline that we got was if we use the JWS JSON serialization format, you can have those attributes as part of the signed payload. And if that particular set of attributes are mandatory for whatever AWS, they can mark a separate thing like critical or something, critical claim, and include what all attributes are required in the payload itself. That extensibility, is it available in Dizzy?
Yeah, Dizzy doesn't tell you what your payload should look like. I think that's our job here. As long as we are careful, there may be some parts of the payload. Dizzy just says, look, we don't care what your payload is. Here's the payload type, and here's the payload itself, and you cover over both. You sign over both, you see? So you don't get confused about how you decode the payload type after you verify the signature. That's all it does. It doesn't tell you what your payload should look like. So here we should be careful that when we define our payload, that we can let you, AWS, do extra parameters if you wanted to.
I see. So for my understanding, there will be some mandatory that all of us will agree on that should be there, like algorithm or expiry or whatnot. But there will be some custom attributes that are specific to a cloud provider. And if that cloud provider thinks they are mandatory for that cloud, they will mark it with a separate claim like critical or something. So maybe we should standardize when we agree on, in addition to algorithm, expiry, and those things, we will also have something called critical, which can be used for extensibility. Is that correct?
I think so, but I'm not familiar with where our documents are here for defining payloads, our payloads here. So
I think this is only the format. Maybe the next step would be to define what are some of the mandatory claims or mandatory attributes that will be there so that the clients will require them when they parse it.
I totally agree.
So as part of it, we should make sure we have this critical or something, we standardize that so that that can be used as an extensibility for cloud provider.
I'll make a point of it in the notes so we don't forget.
Sure.
And if there's anything else there, I was wondering if we could maybe spend some, at least part of the last 10 minutes, just checking in about the governance issues we discussed last week and just seeing if there's been any movement, anything, yeah, just any updates there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was been pinging Justin to see if he can join because he owns that process. So I don't have any more to update here. I know that he's been working on some stuff. Lockie, do you have any more insight you want to?
No, I pinged Justin as you mentioned. It's kind of balls in his court from the work that was done in Notary V1. So I wanted him to weigh in and present whatever governance that he thought was the right thing given the maintainers from Notary V1.
So unfortunately, we don't have any more to share at this point, I guess is the.
We're pinging him and trying to have him weigh in, I guess is the update, Marina.
And we've also, to be fair, we've also been pinging him to figure out a way to scale better. Does he have other people that he'll be able to allocate to have more bandwidth? So it's more than just.
That would definitely be great. I know he's super busy, so I'm sure that would be helpful.
Yeah. All right. We'll get back to a 5-day work week next week. We'll have our Wednesday meeting. And hopefully we can get some more progress on some of these, starting in PRs.
One question I have regarding the TSA, do we need to do it? Is there anything standardizing or some reference implementation for TSA that we should provide, or is it out of scope? Like what TSA endpoints are recommended, or like, is there anything? I'm just asking for my clarity. Or the TSA discussion will be separate. We will handle it in a different meeting series.
I'm just giving Shiwei a chance to answer because Shiwei and Merlin were doing most conversations there.
Can you repeat the question?
Is there anything that we have to discuss about TSA or anything on standardizing the way we talk to TSA, or are there any standards around that, or is there any reference implementation that we need to provide for getting the timestamps?
The specification is in the RFC 3161. Yes. So the format is pretty standardized. The problem we have is we don't have a stable library for Go, and that's the problem.
Oh, for DC you mean? Sorry, I missed that too.
Does DC have a stable? Yeah, that brings up another question. Does DC have a stable Go library, or?
No, there are two separate things, Trishak. The first one is that there's no stable RFC 3161 library for Go. DC does have, but yeah, the RFC 3161 stuff is stable, but nobody supports it.
Yeah, that's one of the issues with the timestamping authorities is, to date, a lot of the people who have done them have not had very stable servers, let alone protocols. But it's not unsolvable. It's just the current state of things.
Yeah, if this is missing, that's a valid question, and I think we should push them to release a stable Go implementation. Shouldn't be difficult.
There is a Go
it's actually very
implementation.
simple.
In Toto
okay,
uses
nice.
the Go one, I think. Yeah.
Got it. Wonderful. Thanks.
So do we need to raise an issue on the DC for the Go library just to initiate the
I think that's more an issue for the TSAs actually.
No, there are two things I think we are mixing and matching here. First one, okay, let's do the DC Go library. For that, how do we want to go about? Do we want to track it through an issue just to have a stable Go library for DC?
I think that there is one. I'll double check.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Then regarding the TSA, Marianne, I missed your point. Are you saying there are some standards or something, RFC standards around TSA? Or Dan?
Yeah, there's RFC 3161, but as far as I know, there's not a Go implementation of that RFC.
I see. Yeah, one more thing is TSA is optional, right? Just to understand, we will have a support for TSA, but I think TSA is completely optional at this point.
Yeah, the current thought process is there's these two categories where the public registries, you're providing content where it moves into private registries. So there's not moves, I gotta stop using the word move, copies into private registries and into air-gapped environments and so forth. So it's really important that a publisher has a way to publish changes in what they support in a published, well-discoverable, well-validated way. And there's a lot of infrastructure that they are willing to invest in, as opposed to the the companies that have complete control over their own environment. They're only deploying it in an environment that they control. They're making copies as they promote it through in their workflows and promote it into their own air-gapped environments, but they know where those deployments are. So they may not want or can't be able to set up additional TSAs. So those are kind of the two categories. And they've also said they're not as worried about revocation. So there's this two large buckets where the publishers of public content, the software and distribution registries will more than likely implement that infrastructure, where the private ones may not. So yeah, it is an optional property.
Okay.
All right. I think that wraps up the agenda for this week. And we'll see if we can make some progress on these into PRs. We'll see everybody next Wednesday.
All right,
Thanks,
thanks
thanks.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Shiwei, for joining so late.